So now what is emerging today is this thing called an algocracy, which is algorithmic governance. Remember, the end game is these uber rich capitalists of transgenerational wealth, okay, that most people can hardly imagine or fathom. They want a world in which they own and control all assets, all resources, and especially the human resources. And they want to do this via machine. They want everybody tethered to the machine because it's efficient. It's more economic.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
You ever heard of someone called Victor Meldrew?
No, you have to send me a link.
Yeah, he used to be this character on British TV, renowned for being a grumpy old man. I think you'd like him.
Yeah, I want to remember his name, so be sure and let me know. I love heroes.
Would you describe yourself as a grumpy old man?
My hero was always Diogenes of Sinope.
Tell me about him.
Diogenes hated fucking everybody. Can you cuss on this podcast?
Well, I think you've already done it, so it's all right.
Just curious.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
You know I don't much like anybody.
Yeah, why don't you like much anybody? Before we start talking about communitarianism, why? I mean, surely you're trying to tell people about communitarianism because you care about humanity and people. Otherwise, why bother? Don't you love people?
I do.
Okay.
With all their flaws, yes, I do.
All right. Okay. Well, let's just dive into your blog and what you said about communitarianism. Recommend everyone check out your website, larkintexas.wixsite.com. There'll be links in the show.
May I suggest a better way to say that?
Yeah, go ahead. Do it, buddy.
tinyurl.com. Stick in your brain, tinyurl.com/Lark in Texas, no separation. So anyway, that's it.
Great. Okay, listen, tell me, why did you start writing a blog about communitarianism? Why are you so passionate about this subject?
I started back in 2004, and then I went public in about 2009. And it was only a few years ago that I started putting my puss on the screen. But basically, given all that I've learned over these past 20-something years, communitarianism is like the elephant in the room that the blind Hindi sojourners cannot see. One stumbles upon its leg, declares it a tree. Another, its side, declares it a wall. Another, its tail, but it's a rope. Another, its tusk, but it's a spear. Another, its trunk, but it's a snake. And finally, the ear of the elephant. Why, this is just a fan. So it is the one word which exists in the English language, which perfectly encapsulates the shit show that we are all witness to today, undergirded as it is by the model legal underpinning of communitarian law, acquis communautaire in the French, community law, community acquis, according to the BBC, to keep the people stupid. And this is the law which is being superimposed in a hyper-connected world globally. It's the tyranny that we live under today, and nobody wants to fucking talk about it.
Well, we're going to talk about it. What made you look into communitarianism? What made you look into it? Because up until a few months ago, I'd never heard of it. How did you come across it, and why did you start looking into it?
Well, there used to be quite a lot of discussion surrounding this word. Of course, it was coined in the English from the French in 1841 by a leader of the Chartist movement there in England. His name was John Goodwin Barmby, and he was a contemporary of the likes of Engels and Marx. In fact, he introduced Engels to French communism and communitarianism, and they in turn introduced the term to Marx. And then fast forward in time, the end of World War I began World War II. The end of World War II began World War III. At the end of World War II, in academia, tanks, etc., the smart people they were talking about convergence theory and social contract theory. Both of these things you can find in any encyclopedia to see what has emerged, because the goal was to merge or converge the systems of the Soviet Union, Communist China, with the systems of the West. And so first they began the takeover of Europe and all of Europe, including the British Isles. And that was a law that emerged, which was 80 years in the making, and it became known in English as communitarian law. And so I realized, because I essentially retired from the workforce at the end of 2005, that I was in a position to actually do the deep dive that I thought was required to bring this knowledge and information into the public domain, so that the guy that shoes a horse for a living and loves dogs could understand it. And that's been quite an undertaking, because there's a lot of moving parts. I like to say that there are three great alchemical dreams of old. Number one, immortality. Number two, the quest for the philosopher's stone, turning lead into gold. And number three, perpetual motion machine. Well, number one, immortality, its first iteration was the corporation. This dates back to the time of at least ancient Rome. And number two, turning lead into gold. Well, this is what we once thought of as war. And number three, perpetual motion machine. This was made a reality with communitarianism. Communitarianism is thought the final solution, the final synthesis, requiring no further conflict or debate in the dialectical conflict modeling formula: problem, reaction, solution.
Okay, Lark, when you say the final solution, are you talking about the final solution of how to manage and control man?
That's
Are
correct.
you talking about, okay, fine. So we're talking about a political mechanism or a control mechanism by which you can contain the masses and keep them under control. Is that what we're talking about?
It's a little more than that. If you go to my website and you look at the very first entry, it describes communitarianism succinctly as 6 parts, 6 things. It's a philosophy, an ideology, a language, a resource and asset management system, a religion, and a law. Is that clear?
Yeah, well, let's break down every single one, please. Can you break down every single one?
Well, sure, without getting too bogged down, because there's a lot.
What I liked in your blog, one of the things you quoted William Pitt in 1783, and you said, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves." So it sounds to me like whenever the people at the top who control us, whenever they want to introduce some new measure, they have to create a crisis, which is the necessity by which we then trade our freedoms and our liberties. And we're seeing a lot of this, aren't we? With wars, the financial crisis, with so-called pandemics. You have all these crises by which then, it justifies them introducing new laws and changes to our society. I mean, that's what every world war did, didn't it? It changed society. It was a societal engineering program, each one of the world wars, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes, we're looking at an orchestration, though, but an orchestration which is predicated with a master plan and a strategy which incorporates game theory, so that, because, as Lenin put it, you have to control all sides of every conflict and debate in order to affect the change that you wish to engender upon a people, a populace. And so, yeah, philosophies are different from ideologies.
Yeah, I just want to stay focused on communitarianism, like for the listeners, just to crystallize what does it mean. Sorry, Lark, can you just, for me, very simply, just break down slowly each of the 6 points in communitarianism, one at a time, please?
It is a philosophy. It is an ideology. It is a language. It is a resource and asset management system. It is a religion, and it is a law. It is a system of socioeconomic governance or management in a hyper-connected world.
Okay, let's take the first one, philosophy. And how is it a philosophy? And How is that any different from ideology?
Communitarians posit that epistemologically and ontologically speaking, that liberalism, what we call classical liberalism, is incoherent. And this is borne out by the likes of Michael Sandel, Michael Walzer, Robert Putnam, Amitai Etzioni, Alistair McIntyre, Charles Taylor, and many more communitarian thinkers. These names can be gleaned by looking at any encyclopedia entry for the word communitarianism, okay? And so it is a system in which it's thought that nation states are obsolete and lines on a map, et cetera, et cetera. To replace the nation state is going to be the market security state. And this is why we see the rise of the regionalized, even smart city state, because they want to herd us all into cities so we can be managed more easily. Basically, concentration or work camps, if you will. Okay, so these people are looking for a world governed by a machine because it's more efficient. And so what they're looking for is a digital prison or zoo or work camp or concentration of sorts in the mold of Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon, which is not only about a model prison, as most people suspect. One need only look at the title page of the original document, titled Panopticon, on the internet to see that it includes the poorhouse, it includes the leper colonies, it includes the factories, the schools, the businesses, the corporations. All of these people are brought under effective thought control because of the very design of the system. So I don't know if I should stop there, but it's certainly a political and a cultural, not only a socioeconomic phenomenon. So how many people did I lose just then? Everybody?
No, no. So, I mean, the keys to appreciating the difference of communitarianism and communitarian law, I mean, one, there's no such thing as individual rights. They're all, in your own words, you talked about it being balanced and harmonized.
Can I explain how?
Yeah, exactly. But let me just finish off. I was basically saying that you've got your individual rights, but, it comes with duties and responsibilities.
Amen.
And the reason why I want to give an example to this, being a doctor, Lark, this is actually very close to me. So I left my medical licensing board because of the persecution that they've done to my fellow colleagues who are dissidents. And I knew sooner or later they're going to come again for me. They've already come once at me. And I'll give you an example. There was a doctor called Dr. Sam White in the UK, and he stood up against the COVID mandate and the vaccines, and he spoke out against the pandemic. And he was taken to tribunal. And in the tribunal judgment, they struck him off. And in the judgment, they say, according to the Human Rights Act, number 10 something A, Dr. Sam White has freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and we accept that. He has the right to say what he likes. But then in the next paragraph, they go, but, in the Human Rights Act B, it says if the freedom of speech hinders public policy, government's policy, the public safety, la-di-da, then you're not entitled to your freedom of speech anymore. What I'm trying to say is the Human Rights Act, and that's based on the one from Europe as well, the EU laws, which the UK adopted, on one hand grants freedom of speech, but on the other hand also withdraws it. It comes with conditions. Now, to me, that's a really good example of communitarianism and communitarian law. Am I right?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. You have it right there. They futz with the language in such a manner that it impacts upon every field of study, every human endeavor, including the law, including the legal industry, the insurance industry, the medical industry. It goes on and on. We have to look at these international standards which have been adopted. Things like ISO, IEEE, IEET, and forgive me, for your listeners, all you have to do is use your search engine and type these letters in them, and you will see, but especially Unidroit, okay? Everything that is a community is also an environment, is also a climate. We have to understand how they've stretched the definitions of these words to be so all-embracing and all-encompassing. There's a trickery of language involved. You do not hear the word communitarian bandied about from the lips of the people you know in your sphere, in your circles. You don't hear it at the water cooler at work. You don't hear it or see it in print or on TV or on the radio for a reason. And the reason is because since 1971, before you were born, many of your listeners were born. Well, I was coming of age in those years, okay? The modern discussion surrounding communitarianism began in earnest with the publication of a book by John Rawls in 1971 titled A Theory of Justice. They could not, over the years, within academia, foundation, think tank, big media circles, agree on the right word to describe what Tony Blair called the third way, the title of a book. Okay? People didn't understand when President Clinton was in office in this country what was meant by reinventing government, which was a policy initiative begun at that time. And all the presidents in America ever since have been promulgating communitarianism undergirded by communitarian law. It is provable in myriad number of ways. And the same is true in England, the Commonwealth countries, the entire world. So Russia today is communitarian. China today is communitarian. Okay. And so maybe I'm dancing too much for you at this moment, but your thought.
No, I don't doubt you for a second. I think I agree with you. And the thing is, I think there's two reasons why they didn't like the word communitarianism mentioned. One, the whole act is subversive. It's taking place without people even knowing it. And they don't want people to know about it. And two, the word sounds very much like communism. So I think even if people didn't understand communitarianism, the fact it just sounds like communism, they're like, oh man, it's not the kind of thing we can sell to people. They're probably going to mistake it for that. And it's just, let's just not talk about it. And to me, what I want to get across to the listeners is communitarianism is this very broad umbrella under which there are different tools and tentacles by which the bad people can influence and affect change within society, our education, our health, our living, our food, everything, the nation state. It's a very broad umbrella term. And that's why I want to really dig into it and talk about it a little bit more. But I just want to quickly show you something. This is the Human Rights Act that I was talking about. And you can find it on equalityhumanrights.com. And it's Equality and Human Rights Commission. So here we go. Article 10 protects your right to hold your own opinions. Sounds great, doesn't it, Lark? There you go.
Oh, indeed. The language is flowery and cosseting and deceptive.
Absolutely. So Article 10 protects your right to hold your own opinions. Woohoo! There you go. And look, it says Article 10 protects your right to hold your own opinions and to express them freely without government interference. Blah, blah, blah. But there's a small problem. There's a small problem. You just go down a wee bit. Guys, sorry. There are restrictions to the right to freedom of expression. So hold on one second. I'm sorry, I'm really confused here. You've just said Article 10 protects my right to hold your own opinions. But now you're saying there's some restrictions. Although you have freedom of expression, folks, you also have a duty to behave responsibly and to respect other people's rights. Public authorities may restrict this right if they can show that their action is lawful, necessary, and proportionate in order to protect national security, public safety, prevent disorder or crime, protect health or morals, protect the rights and reputations of other people, blah, 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 blah. And so let's come to this. They've just granted and taken away your right to freedom of speech. Let's go back to that very good example, Dr. Sam White. He is warning people that the government is rolling out a dangerous experimental shot and it's not in the public safety or health to take their intervention. But a government body, the GMC, then deems it that Dr. Sam White was in fact being reckless and dangerous, and without really even proving it, without even showing demonstrably that they were correct, they simply said, to protect the health and public safety message, we need to take Dr. Sam White's freedom of expression away from him. It's nonsense, Lark. And this is just one example. And there must be so many, whether it's environmental, educational, you name it. There must be so many areas that are mirrored just like this in today's laws in this country, in the EU, and the States. Am I right?
Indeed, you are. I might add that in 1927, Julien Benda wrote La Treason des Clercs, the treason of the intellectuals, in which he stated that to paraphrase, the group which desires to be strong has no use for the man who claims to think for himself. And that includes to express himself. Because in a corporate environment today, what is sought is a good team player, somebody that's not going to cause the machine not to function properly, because that's what they're operating as, is a collectivist corpus body with limited liability protections for their shareholders, their stakeholders, their bondholders, et cetera, et cetera. But meanwhile, you as a doctor, and this is Mr. White, they must be guided accordingly. And so this is why you have organized crime run amok in the world, because under communitarianism, we're talking about a system of child, sex, drug, organ, and human trafficking made legal. We're talking about a system of gangsterism, organized crime made legal. And yet people do not realize that they're swept up as capos, for instance, in a regime of organized crime, aka the mob or the mafia. A mafia gang has taken over your small town or your region, and now you must comply or die. And what is exercised is what an internet wag has called the 5 Bs, and that would be bribe, blackmail, bully, banish, or bury. This is how you are, as an individual, persuaded not to break the rules and speak out against the diktats of the leadership of the group. The same is true in any corporation and any trade union, including white collar, and not to mention only blue collar trade unions, but white collar trade unionism, because that's what we have is 2 examples of socialism run amok throughout the world: trade unionism or syndicalism and corporativism, both of which are forms of socialism.
Can you just repeat the 5 Bs again? I thought they were brilliant.
Blackmail, bribe, bully, banish, bury. So you get a little bit testy and you become a threat, then maybe somebody will suicide you.
Yeah. Well, there was that Dr. Kelly, who was looking at the WMDs in Iraq and saying how there were none. And suddenly he was found in a hedgerow with his wrist slit. I mean, the man, clearly didn't have any suicidal history or anything. He's in the middle of this whole WMD Iraq war business, and suddenly he's just found dead. Yeah, not suspicious at all.
The people that put those contracts out are the people that are making tons of money, generally speaking. And that's why people that speak their mind and speak out and see the reality for what it is, see the subterfuge, because they pose a threat, they have to be silenced. And probably the 4 previous Bs were already exercised upon them and they did not bend. That's why they were suicided.
Well, I've been bullied and I've been banished. I've got no intention of killing myself. I can tell you that right now. So while we're talking about things like Human Rights Act and human rights law and blah, 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 can we just talk about reflexive law? So these are the laws, these soft laws that create burdensome barriers to entry for, startup businesses, small entrepreneurs. Basically, you're subject to these arbitrary interpretations and enforcements of laws deliberately designed to just make things really difficult for you. You always have to consult, like you said, your jailers before you can do anything. Whether it's environmental, land use laws, copyright violations, trademark, patent privileges, standards, codes, regulations, rules, ordinances. It's all about choking your economic spirit, entrepreneurship, and it always benefits the large globalist corporations. They can afford teams of lawyers and cut through all the paperwork. But for small people, these reflexive laws, they just destroy you, don't they? Do you want to just expand on that?
Well, remember, we're talking about a marriage of communism and capitalism here with communitarianism. It's a rebranding of both, okay? And so if you read Marxist literature, and most people don't, by and large, I never could get a straight answer as a youngster. What's communism? What's its threat? Because, see, that was the great boogeyman as I was coming of age in the years before, and I couldn't get a straight answer from anybody that satisfied me. Don't forget, I was part of the generation that had to do dives under their desk because we were threatened by this menace called global nuclear war, et cetera, et cetera. And so the communists, according to their literature, the first group they always target is the middle class, and that's the bourgeoisie, because they seek to reduce their ranks. This would be the people that, say, in America, they feel like they've got skin in the game. They are working the American dream. You know, the white picket fence, the house on the hill, the lake house, 2 or 3 automobiles, a boat, the ability to travel, lots of time, plenty of money. This is the American dream, and it's the dream of most people around the world. But they always sought, first and foremost, to target the bourgeoisie, because in a communist caste system, at the top, you have the intelligentsia. Below them, you have the bureaucracy called the nomenclatura. Then you have the bourgeoisie, and then you have the proletariat, which are the peasants, the landless peasants and wage slaves at the bottom who own no property. So by targeting the kulaks, for example, during the time of Holodomor, this is the private landowners who had some measure of wealth because they were largely self-sufficient. They raised food crops, etc. They had to reduce those people and bring them into the ranks of the proletariat. Meanwhile, the nomenclatura expands. Okay, this would be the bureaucracy. This would be all the people that claim authority over your behaviors, your actions, what you can do and what you can't do in this world. Okay, and they do this for a reason, and it's because the people who are now inculcating, sucking up all this wealth from the bourgeoisie, they seek a firewall to protect themselves from the now burgeoning ranks of the proles wielding their pitchforks, threatening the palace. So that is in all the communist literature. Okay, they have to target what we see today, the middle class. And that would have been you. That was me. Regular people that's trying to get by in this world and do the best they can with the skills, the experiences, the training that they've learned in order to make their way in this thing called life. In a capitalist system, this is also a caste system, okay? Because it's organized around a corporation, by and large, and variants thereof. You have the shareholders at the top, then you have the board of directors, then you have management, and then you have labor, okay? There's even today a transhumanist caste system, okay? And according to Joseph P. Farrell and Scott D. Hart in their book titled Transhumanism, a Grimoire of Alchemical Agendas, basically you have at the top, you have androgynous man. He will not breathe. Then you have plant man, or forgive me, then you have mineral man. And this is a person, a human being, presumably fitted with a silicon chip, because he can be controlled externally. Then you have plant or vegetable man. And this is the man that's thought docile and easily led, like a cow or sheep chewing their cud in the field, feeding on grass. They pose no threat. But at the bottom, the one that they seek to reduce the ranks of significantly is animal man. Animal man is thought to be problematic because he is not predictable. And so we have all these different models for caste systems. Plato had a caste system, in his time. People don't today, even people on the so-called right, we don't like communism, but they don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't like wokeism and they don't like homosexuals, or they don't like what they're doing in the schools to the kiddos and all this other stuff. And that's understandable, but their knowledge is limited by and large, the average person. And it's understandable as well. Again, then other people honestly do not know that capitalism has the identical objective as communism. It is monopoly and ownership and control over all means of production. So the fact of the matter is, we're presented with this false dialectical conflict model: communism versus capitalism, right? And the fact of the matter is, using my parlance, they both suck.
Yeah. Well, you only need to look at the 10 communist manifesto points, and you're like, wait, hold on a sec. So abolition of private property. I can tell you right now, buddy, very few people in this country can afford private property. We're now a renter class. Heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Yeah, pretty much 90% of what you earn in a lifetime is now paid in direct and indirect tax. If that's not heavy, I don't know what is. Abolition right of inheritance. Now there's a crazy inheritance tax. And, especially they're attacking the farmers, where when farmers die, they can't pass it on to their children because the inheritance tax was just going to crush them. Confiscate property owned by immigrants and rebels. Establish a national bank, central bank. It's funny that, isn't it? The communists are wanting to establish a central bank. Nationally controlled communications and transport. Government ownership of the means of production. Industrial and agricultural armies. Redistribute the population. Free and public education. Quite a lot in common.
I think probably the one that sticks out in my mind is the breakup of the family tribal unit.
Yeah.
This is a principal aim, I think, at the end of the day.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because they don't want the knowledge of the previous generations to be passed down to the young people. They want to train and socially engineer and indoctrinate the young people on their terms with using their language. The parents, they're wrong and they're misguided. And so the state's going to take over. And don't forget, people don't remember this. When the Bolsheviks took over, created the so-called USSR, they called what they were creating republics, a union of republics. Interesting that. Lenin had two American heroes of sorts. One was John Dewey, and the other one was Frederick Winslow Taylor, F.W. Taylor. Now, he was called the father of scientific management. And then his successors were people like William Edwards Deming and Peter Drucker. But John Dewey was instrumental working with the General Education Board under Rockefeller funding, basically the takeover of American public education. Now, this happened in Europe too, different names, different personages, etc. And so that's very interesting. Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, one of his heroes that he paid homage to was a New Yorker, and his name was Madison Grant. And so he was a prominent eugenicist of his day. I always say that if you really want to look at tyranny with the smiley face, a la communitarianism, look to the GRIN technology, GRIN, genetics, robotics, information, and nano. This is the tip of the spear. This is what's bringing this destruction, this enslavement, and this weaponized assault upon the people of the world today. Nobody has ever come to terms with the fact that this so-called information technology, known as IT/AI, is number one, deleterious, even very harmful to human health. In fact, all biological life on the planet. They've never done the safety studies that were consummate and complete and thorough, and this is by design. And the other thing, too, is we have to understand that communitarianism constitutes the most sophisticated tracking, tracing, espionage tool ever devised. It is a weapon of mass destruction. And we just blithely go along about our ways, embracing the tech, ignoring the military-grade infrastructure being erected all around us that's harming human health, that's causing people to get brain cancers and turbo cancers and everything else. And meanwhile, you have people that are scientists and engineers, researchers, working mightily to poison and enslave the people with no regard for what they're friggin' doing.
Lark, do you mind if I just take a moment to just clarify again what communitarianism is? I think the reason why it's such a difficult thing to define and visualize and understand it is because it is deliberately nebulous and so broad arching and, covers so many topics that it's difficult to pin down, right? But basically, I'm going to give it a chance. It's a base social and political philosophy, okay? That's about emphasizing the importance of community in shaping individuals and society. It advocates for a balance between individual rights and social responsibilities. So it's not about your individual inalienable rights, unalienable rights. It's about balancing it with social responsibilities, arguing that personal freedom should be exercised in a way that benefits the community as a whole. So yeah, you've got personal freedom, but as long as it's benefiting everyone else. And then the question is, who decides whether it's benefiting everyone else? Who is the arbiter of truth? Who's the arbiter of what is the greater good and what is public safety and blah, blah, blah. And that's where it gets really murky. And the key ideas of communitarianism is, this idea of the common good, the greater good. And we've heard this recently, particularly with the COVID pandemic. So society and even climate change, I mean, you name it. Basically, society should prioritize the well-being of the community rather than just the individual self-interest. Okay? Being individual self-interest is basically selfish, right? You don't care, and in the UK, again, going back to the pandemic, because a good example is, you have to do this to protect the NHS, to protect the healthcare system. You have to do this to protect granny. You have to do this. You have to wear a mask, for the community to protect other people. You have to take the jab to protect your family and your granny. You're doing stuff not for yourself anymore, but for other people. And then there's this balance between rights and responsibility. So while individual freedoms are important, they'll say that to you, but they should not come at the expense of social cohesion and, mutual obligations. They'll say you really need strong local communities, but who's going to argue against that? Communitarianism promotes this local governance and shared values. And there's moral and cultural traditions. And it's, they stress the importance of that forming, functioning society. But they don't like liberalism because liberalism is focusing on your individual rights and freedoms. They don't believe that liberalism is the right thing because sometimes it can be at the expense of collective responsibility, in their words. Libertarianism also prioritizes minimal government interference and also promotes personal liberty. So they don't like libertarians. Socialism emphasizes economic equality and state intervention and doesn't necessarily always, help the local community. So that it's not 100% socialism. Communitarianism is trying to basically wrap everything together. Like you said, this third way where they're advocating, yeah, you can have a bit of personal liberty, but it comes with strings attached. Am I right?
Yeah, and I want to add that you can't attach a million words to every single aspect of this and just basically run around in circles. Now, let me illustrate that. So anyway, Newspeak then, George Orwell, Newspeak, 1984, is communitarian code speak now. So Newspeak then, 1949, 1984 was published, is communitarian code speak now, which means that what we're talking about is turns of phrase and terms of art, which are wielded like weapons against the people. Memetic engineering and memetic warfare is the principal concern of the Department of Defense and people in big media circles. Why is that? Well, I was alive then when that book was published called The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins, 1976. And why is it that the British Royal Society has called it the most important science to emerge in the late stages of the 20th century over all other? Why is it they call this a science? Because it's what I have said before. The nexus between humanism and scientism is probabilism. The psychometricians, the tech bras, hate those bastards. They posit that probabilism is key. They are quite enamored with this particular ism because probabilism posits that in the absence of certainty, then probability will do. So now what is emerging today is this thing called an algoracy, which is algorithmic governance. Remember, the end game is these uber rich capitalists of transgenerational wealth, okay, that most people can hardly imagine or fathom. They want a world in which they own and control all assets, all resources, and especially the human resources. And they want to do this via machine. They want everybody tethered to the machine because it's efficient. It's more economic. And this is the world which is emerging that we see because of our love affair with this friggin' tech, okay? The tech crazies are running amok, and the tech bros hate these motherfuckers, okay? They are leading the charge, but on behalf of whom, we must ask? What's the people that own the money? that make all of us debtors. It's imaginary. It's only via contract or acceptance of an offer that we even trade in this drivel, if you will. So again, this is very important. You have to understand that Nikki Rapana and her daughter wrote a book called the Anti-Communitarian Manifesto in 2003. She passed away almost 3 years ago, age 65. When she started researching about this subject, it's because the police were knocking on her door in Seattle, in a lower middle class neighborhood in which she was a renter, and they demanded to enter the premises because they were going to take an inventory. And she goes, no, you're not permitted. Other people in her neighborhood allowed this to happen. She followed this. She asked questions. She went down to City Hall. She researched and studied. She became engrossed in this topic because it seemed so un-American. The result is something called 2020, Our Common Destiny. If anybody wants to get a starter, do a search. The Definitive Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. It is an ebook. They can read 2 books in one, 2020, Our Common Destiny, and the revised edition of both in 2012, titled The Definitive Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. Now, this is where it can begin for anybody, okay? And I'm a font of information and knowledge about where to get these resources so you can make a determination for yourself if this word is not the single most important word in the English language that people like ourselves who speak language as English need to know, but that nobody seems to know because it is undergirded by this thing called communitarian law. And again, people don't want to know. And that's why at 70 years old, I'm going to leave it up to you guys in your 40s and 50s, okay? Because I'm not going to be around forever either. But you need to determine, because people like you have children. I do not, okay? I'm not in the workforce. I don't need to earn a living. And that's why I've devoted 20 years of my life to studying this thing so that I can help people. But if you do not read and you do not want to read, I can't help you. Okay, we can talk. You can go to my entry at my website. It's called Lark on Communitarianism, and I can expound on every single ism, which encompasses this so-called all-encompassing ism word known as communitarianism. Remember, any word that has that suffix ism, do not fear it. Even a multisyllabic word ending in ism. It simply means school of thought. And within every school of thought, you will always have variance of opinion. No big deal. It's a stupid word. But guess what? The people around the world are being herded like sheep. We are being buffalo jumped like the American Plains Indians would stampede a herd, a small herd, or a portion of a herd toward a ravine, a cliff, so that they could harvest the meat, the hide, the bones for the winter so they could survive. Well, guess what? That's you. That's me. So long as we ignore this topic, staying 100% focused as you're endeavoring to do right now with me, we're going nowhere fast. And guess what else? There is zero measurable, demonstrable pushback. All these people that deign to claim that they represent you in any way, they do not. They cannot. They are not qualified to represent your interests as an individual. And I'm going to say one more time, the only expert that matters is you. No one else, you, okay? And that's why I say I have an entry titled Trust Your Gut. And I try to make allowances for the people that are not people that are into words. Maybe they're into science, engineering, math. Maybe they just want to party all the time and nothing else matters. I understand that. But there is something about man before language. Language is also a technology. It's man's oldest technology. It is nothing but a tool, like money, a contrivance of man. And I tell people, you have one go round in this thing called life. It's your life that matters, okay? You want to experience this thing called life to the hilt. Therefore, you must accept things like I am independent. I'm not codependent, interdependent, or dependent. And this is all being bred out of us as a species. But anyway, I'm rambling again, and I apologize.
Lark, I would say, when I read your blog, it's clear you're very well read. You've got a great grasp of the English language, but you've also got a fantastic philosophical mind. I think the problem with today is that so many people are distracted and, in effect, being dumbed down by social media, by TV, by distractions, or they're just tired. They're tired of doing 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. And then finding the time and effort to read and understand philosophy and history and geopolitics is quite hard. In one respect, I can understand why it's hard. But equally, actually, it's quite easy. When you read your blog, it's actually really nice to read. It's not difficult. And I think one of the things you made clear was one in the quote, look, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. And that's Ludwig Wittgenstein. And that's true. If you don't have very many words in your head, you don't have a broad vocabulary, it's actually impossible to conceptualize and understand and articulate and formulate in your head what freedom looks like, what tyranny looks like, and how to resist it and how to fight it. If your vocabulary is limited, your outlook of the world is limited, the way you think is limited, and the way you appreciate the world is limited. This is why people need to read. But can I tell you something? People don't read anymore, mate.
No,
It just
they do not.
Like, forget Substack, forget books. Like, they just don't read.
Yeah, Nikki Rapana and I agreed as we were being interviewed on the talk radio show about 10 years ago. People don't read, and they don't, because they've got all this bling, all this titillation. They want the visual. They want the dancing girls. They want the comedians, the ha-ha boys, the memes. And see, there's a woman, you can go to this website. It's called lindastone.net/F. And she asks the question, what is continuous partial attention? And how does that differentiate from multitasking? You can read the first 2 paragraphs and grasp it immediately, what we're talking about, and it's danger.
Okay. Continuous partial attention describes how many of us use our attention today. It is different from multitasking. The two are differentiated in part by the impulse that motivates them. When we multitask, we are motivated by a desire to be more productive and more efficient. We're often doing things that are automatic, that require very little cognitive processing. We give the same priority to much of what we do when we multitask. We file and copy papers, we talk on the phone, we eat lunch. We get as many things done at one time as possibly can in order to make more time for ourselves and in order to be more efficient and more productive. To pay continuous partial attention is to pay partial attention continuously. It is motivated by a desire to be a live node on the network. Another way of saying this is what we want to connect and be connected. We want to be effectively scan for opportunity and optimize for the best opportunities, activities, and contacts in any given moment. To be busy, to be connected, is to be alive, to be recognized, and to matter. We pay continuous partial attention in an effort not to miss anything. It is an always on, anywhere, anytime, any place behavior that involves an artificial sense of constant crisis. We're always in high alert when we pay continuous partial attention. This artificial sense of constant crisis is more typical of continuous partial attention than that is of multitasking. Fantastic, mate. I'll give an example. If you go to any public transportation hub, whether it be the metro, the train station, the airport, the bus, coach, and you look at people with their phones and they're all flicking, constantly flicking. They're just flicking on their feed, just looking. And I was amazed because I recently went into London, had to take public transport. I was looking everywhere. I was like, what are they doing with their thumb? And then I just kind of nosed in and kind of looked over someone's shoulder to see what they're doing. And, I don't know if it was Facebook, Instagram, but they were just looking rapid fire at pictures. And I was thinking in my head, you can't even read what was on that post that quick. How can you move so fast? And then suddenly it would stop, pause, like for maybe 2 seconds, they hit a like button and then flicking again. And then it would pause, like, flick. It was insane. And I'm afraid this is a big chunk of humanity now, including, sadly to say, children. And, I was talking to you about podcasts and retention of my audience, and my audience is amazing. 75% of my audience will stay with me from the beginning of the podcast to the end. And when you think about my average podcast being 90 minutes to 2 hours, that's a lot. The average podcast is like 40%. So my audience is clearly clued up, smart, kind of people who read. So hopefully they're sticking with you and I at this on podcast because it's important, and hopefully they will visit your blog and read it and understand why communitarianism is important. But yeah, I mean, I love the fact you're philosophical and you've gone into so much detail, but I want to quickly ask you something. Where does technocracy fit? Because right now, I've had Patrick Woods on and we're talking about technocracy. He's kind of skipped a few things. I didn't 100% agree with him on everything. But where does technocracy fit into communitarianism? Is technocracy underneath the umbrella of communitarianism? Are they side by side? Are they two different things completely? Or does communitarianism use technocracy to further its agenda?
A friend of mine and a longtime talk radio host living in Montana, the network is based in Austin, Texas. He puts it this way: technocracy is the hardware. Communitarianism is the software.
I like it.
I think that's well put. And so I repeat it here. I should also say that, to reiterate, there is a whole language, a vocabulary that has arisen around this word, which is verboten to say on the BBC for a reason. They never say this word in big media circles. It's very rarely that you'll see it in some obscure article in the New York Times, in a book review perhaps, buried in the sheaves of that newspaper. Same with the press organs around the world. And that it's because it's thought that people want things simple and stupid presented to them because they just do not have the capacity to grasp anything. Now, I call it communitarian code speak. And there is a lexicon, a glossary, a language. There is dictionaries full of these turns of phrase and terms of art that we think mean one thing because they seem innocuous, harmless sounding, but they mean an entirely more specific thing altogether. Now, you're not going to be able to see this unless you see this long list, which grows every day, of examples of what is called communitarian buzzwords, but which I call communitarian code speak. Okay, and so and that's why I say Newspeak then is communitarian code speak now. So the first thing you have to ask yourself, well, I want to see these words. I want to know if I've heard them. I want to know if I've seen them in print so I can understand and see how I'm being deceived. Here's some examples. Number one, community. Community. The communitarians have hijacked it. How about quality learning? Sounds good, doesn't it? Communitarians hijacked it. How about quality of life? Ever heard of the United Nations Global Happiness Report?
Yeah.
How about free trade? Sounds good.
Yeah.
And see, there are hundreds of examples of these words.
Can I give you some examples?
Please.
Common good, social responsibility, mutual obligation, civic duty, shared values, social cohesion, moral fabric, localism, grassroots engagement, neighborhood resilience, civic engagement, public spirit, strong communities, rights and responsibilities, participatory democracy, holistic governance, social justice, moral economy, civics, virtue, sustainable development, ethical capitalism, digital commons, social entrepreneurship, collaborative economy, well-being over wealth, corporate social responsibility, regenerative communities.
Oh
what do you
my,
think?
you're on a roll.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you're doing great. Doing great. Yeah, the bottom line here is that we're being deceived, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to tell you right now, those people and see, here's the thing that an old correspondent of mine has said. He's quite well educated. He grew up in an Intel family. He has 2 degrees. He put his only son through Yale on scholarship. He's no dummy. He said, whether dupe or shill, the result is the same. So unless we target this word and this law and understand its ramifications and its threat, we are not talking about anything that's going to provide any real pushback. I thought that I should just get off the internet. I want to publish an underground newspaper like I did in high school in 70 and 71. It was called Ball. This one I want to title Post-Truth News. We lie constantly, so you don't have to. And I want to target what I call the C people. The C people are all around you. You're surrounded by zombies and criminals that are ushering in this clearly emerging, seeable new form of global to local governance that has a name, a label. It's communitarianism. It's not only technocracy or stakeholder capitalism or scientism or progressivism. Go to Lark on Communitarianism at my website and read it. It'll take you 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
Mate, don't
You
worry.
have that capacity. And I also say this. People say, oh, gee, Lark, you never talk about remedies and solutions. Well, that's a lie. It's right there. You can read every word on that website in under an hour. Every word. Trust your gut. Read it. There was something before language. We knew it as instinct and intuition. Trust your gut. It is more hardwired into us as a human being than anything emanating from language, which is a contrivance of man. Okay? Trust your gut. It tells you a lot. If something smells rotten in Denmark, it's rotten. Okay? The other entry is called 9 words. This is where I suggest that you follow the prompts, the words, to create a simple exercise on one sheet of paper with a pencil. You can teach it to a 5-year-old. And the question that's overarching is simply this: what matters? What matters? And don't forget, we are bombarded every day with inconsequential mind chatter within this thing called the mediascape. And the battle is for the mind. Before democide and gemicide, genocide is menticide. This is what's happening. We are being deceived, and especially because we refuse, all the smart people amongst us, the journalists, the truth tellers, they don't want to talk about this because this is not good stuff for the radio. Okay. And they don't want to talk about law because, that's boring, But when we take a deep dive into any discipline of study, within every field of human endeavor, we are going to see these buzzwords, policies and procedures, standards and practices. We are being deceived and allowing it. We are going to be enslaved and we're going to be assaulted. And I'll close with this. There's only 3 words you need to even know and understand if you want to know anything or care to know anything about communitarianism, undergirded by the superimposition of communitarian law in a hyper-connected world everywhere. And the words are depopulation, technoslavery, and property. Now, would you like me to expand upon that, or you want me to hold off?
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
By all means, talk about the technocracy and depopulation first. Yeah, tell me about that.
Depopulation is a euphemism for total war. It is unrestricted war. There is no morals, okay? Don't forget, under communitarianism, you have a perpetual motion machine amongst the people. The people that are surrounding you, they're the ones that are waging war on you. They're the ones intending you harm. They're intending you a life of misery and confusion, confoundedness, okay? Because you're allowing it. When I talk about warfare, I'm talking about psychological, asymmetric, nonlinear, cultural, economic, cybernetic, mimetic, lawfare. Every kind of warfare that you can conceive that the average person doesn't think of as war. War for the average person is bullets passing in the streets, bombs bursting in the air. But see, that's not the pinnacle of warfare today, is it? If we read Sun Tzu's Art of War, for example, the idea is to wage war upon the people so that the people are unaware that they're even being warred upon. This is how you accomplish your aims. And with all warfare, what is the aim? Control of territory, control of resources, control of people, control of currency, control of the law, all means of production. That's depopulation. And it's a thing. It's real. The entire allopathic medical model, what we used to know before you were born, Doc, as Rockefeller medicine, we knew it was dirty in the 60s and the 70s. I knew at 15 years old, I could not possibly become a doctor or a dentist like my daddy wanted. And I told my mom the same thing. She wanted me to be a journalist, a writer, a poet. an author, but especially she wanted me to become an attorney or a lawyer or a judge or a politician. I said to both of them, I couldn't possibly. This is organized crime. I've had one go round in this life. And you want me to join the mob, the mafia, and harm people? No, I can't do it. So what is technoslavery? Technology and slavery. One word. The Unabomber wrote about it.
Did he?
Oh, he did. The title is Technological Slavery. His name was, what was his name? Theodore Kaczynski. And I have studied his writings. Remember, he was a math prodigy at Harvard. He was the youngest professor ever at UC Berkeley in California. So I would suggest that smart people out there, learn about his life, learn about his writings. There's a gentleman by the name of David Skirbina, Skrbina. David Skirbina. You can find him on YouTube. He was a co-author, a longtime correspondent of this man. Technoslavery, what is it? A technology is a tool. That's what it is, end of story. But a tool is not only an anvil, a rock, a spear, an axe, an automobile, a chainsaw, a train, the internet. It's also a language. Language is man's oldest technology, a contrivance of man. It's also this thing called money. So how easily can we be fooled in a system of techno-slavery in which the tech bros would really love it if our smartphones were shoved right up our ass. And instead, we didn't need a smartphone because they could operate us like a golem, like a Frankenstein monster remotely. Do the magic of science. Techno-slavery. It's a real thing. And it's happening in real time right now to all of us. And I finally will finish by the word property. So ask yourself, what is it we all stand to lose more than anything else in this world? Number one, the right to any claim to privacy. Privacy is concomitant with property. Who owns your mind? Who owns your body? Who has a higher claim than you? Who owns your means of locomotion? Your legs, your bicycle, your scooter, your automobile, your plane, your horse. And who owns the place where you hang your hat up at night? Who has a higher claim? Well, we all stand to lose this property. And a man or a woman who cannot own property under any construction of the law is a slave. And so I'm against it. And I also don't like the fact that I'm surrounded by zombies and criminals, including doctors and attorneys and politicians and appointees to this and that. And all of these damn agencies of government that supposedly have authority over me, I hate them all. I call them the sea people. These are the sea people, communitarians. Nikki Rapana, do a search, wrote an article 20 years ago. Its title is We Are All Communitarians Now.
I can recognize them everywhere, in our NHS, public health bodies, everywhere. I can see them all. Going back to another thing on your blog, you talked about SLAP, Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. This is what they do to any dissident, whether you're journalist, doctor,
That's
activist.
Right.
They will find some way to grind you down in the system and attack you, whether it's libel or some breach of some act or law, something. They will want, that's how they destroy you. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's called lawfare. It's an aspect of lawfare. Let's put it this way. The system is so far gone that a person that has any conscience at all, any semblance of morality left, synapses colliding synchronistically within their noggins, they're going to come to the same conclusion. And by the way, our Buckminster Fuller pretty much said the same thing. You're not going to change one damn thing within the existing paradigm. If you want to change anything, you have to create a new model, which renders the old model obsolete. Now, he also said, dare to be naive. And I would invite your listeners to look that up. Whatever did he mean? Now, he was a thing when I was coming up. Okay, and I could go on and on and on and on. I mean, I once catered an event in 1981 for about 1,500 to 2,000 people. It was titled Creativity, the Human Resource, and R. Buckminster Fuller, who was regarded as a polymath of his time, public intellectual, was the keynote speaker. So I also used to work at the place called the Caravan of Dreams before I moved to Dallas in the early days. That was Biosphere 1. Architectural Digest called that the finest nightclub ever conceived in North America. It had $1 million sound system. I was the last of its staff and their employees before it went dark. And I once had a lengthy conversation of a couple of hours at a Halloween party with the billionaire who funded half of the development of downtown Fort Worth. And his name was Edward P. Bass. And we talked about metaphysics, and we talked about urban planning because we both shared a common interest. But if you want to know, if your listeners want to know how it is that a billionaire thinks, then look to his mentor from his school days at Yale. And his name was John Allen, Allen, a.k.a. Johnny Dolphin. He's still alive. He's in his 80s, maybe his 80s. That was his mentor. And of course, Mr. Bass also funded what was called Biosphere 2 in Oracle, Arizona. This was a huge glass geodesic dome in which these scientists all got together to determine how they could recreate the biosphere, our environment. And I could tell you lots of stories about my experience at that time and this and that. But see, that was a revelation because that's what these people think. They intend to control as much as they are able. We're not talking just the bankers. We're talking about their favored trading partners, like the billionaires and the trillionaires and stuff like that in this world. So we have to actually, at the end of the day, we've got to get down to brass tacks. Again, what matters? And as individuals, I champion the individual. I don't care what your vocabulary is. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care how you were socially engineered, indoctrinated, brainwashed heretofore. I want you to ask yourself what matters. And what you have to do to provide any kind of pushback is, number one, you've got to open your mouth and be able to say what you want to say with people. And you need to learn who those people might be in your life. When we talked about the 9 words, I talk about words like well-beingness. Well, that's the condition of well-being. And I talk about econo-me. Well, that's your economy. That's your personal economy. Forget about what anybody else thinks or has to say that's blathering on and on about on your TV about what is the economy. You're the expert. And finally, there's this thing called law. Well, let me tell you something about law. I don't friggin' like attorneys. I don't like judges and politicians. These people, in my view, suck. I don't want any part of them. They have earned zero respect from me. Okay? I don't give a damn what they have to say about anything. So I decided at the end of the day, I had to come up with my own law, by God, and I did. And I condensed it down to one word. And you can too. The word is counteract, counteract. Contained therein are the letters which form other words like act, react, contact, and contract. And all of life involves contact and contract. I tell people all the time, I recommend it. The Anatomy of Slave Speak. 1997, Frederick Mann. Read all this stuff. Read Chinese Contracts by Jim Bullock. Do a search. You can find these things and learn about what is a contract and how it is that you can avoid forced compliance. Or you have to learn these things because if you, at the end of the day, what matters is your well-beingness. That's your wealth. That's your happiness. That's your serenity. Okay, that's your health. And then when we talk about the economy, we have to look at the actual root of that word and what does economy mean? It's basically the ergonomic management of your own household. And that household resides first and foremost inside your own skin. Okay. And we could talk all about the pitfalls, the minefields, the trap, and go on and on and on about how it is that we can say escape the grid and live off the land and or be able to contract freely with people that you choose to bring into your circle and that are your favorite trading partners. And we could talk about all of that. But unless we get the essentials right about what matters, we're not going anywhere, are we?
So, Lark, I'm going to read from your blog, and I think because this section really, really nails what it means about communitarianism. You talk about how weaponizing the language closes the doors of human perception. For example, political correctness is only one such example. Today's philosophers and theologians, the religio-philosophers, scientists and legal theorists, social, cultural, political and economic and behavioral theorists, would-be philosopher kings and academicians to all conspire, all conspire to enslave the mind and to govern human action in the name of humanity or science and community. These priests of the mind speak of the precautionary principle. Then they speak of noblesse oblige, where like the nobles, have got this principle of doing good and because they're entitled. All the while citing their erudition and mere attempts to do good by others. They insist it is their responsibility to protect us from ourselves. When such doors are systematically and cumulatively closed, enslavement of the mind of each and every man, woman, and child born into this material spiritual plane of existence just tippy-toes right on in. Thus, man can literally volunteer him or herself into slavery. Remember, involuntary slavery is illegal, whereas voluntary slavery has never been made illegal. Witness the communitarians' enchantment today with volunteerism. Such a phenomenon is not nearly the same as voluntarism, and yet it is voluntary servitude which is very often communitarian policy writ large. And is this all in keeping with some spurious attempt to deny other men free will? Is this some well-meaning yet misguided attempt to deny man his connection to God and to unalienable rights? Unalienable being rights that cannot be traded away, as opposed to inalienable rights that can be traded away. To logos, to is yearning to be free now through a thought somehow untenable, a lost cause. This is often what happens and will happen when the doors of perception are closed. Man will have enslaved himself while consigning future generations to the same slavery he has himself unwittingly prescribed as this generation's final solution today. So to clarify, modern slavery in a communitarian world is brought about slowly through a subtle imposition of coercion and force. It springs from the cold hearts and addled minds of thoroughly misguided, yes, laughingly fallible men. I've talked about this where most people now are designing, building, and walking into their own prisons and thanking their jail masters on the way in. Another thing you said, what is communitarian law? It's a new legal system used by regional and local governments affiliated with the emerging global government. And this new law circumvents national law via a program of balancing, inverted commas. So whenever you see that word balancing, you know they're doing it. Often implemented by a small group of self-appointed elites who achieve consensus, not voting. And a communitarian law is the precedent that requires the courts to rule in favor of the self-defined community against individuals protected by constitutional law. I mean, fundamentally, it goes against the whole American Constitution, I think, and most Constitution. So it's all based on the consensus reached by the globalist do-gooders. All nations are now required to adjust their national systems. Very powerful, mate. Very powerful.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of people that I know in my life. The very few friends that are in my circle, they're all smarter than I am. And thank God for that. I mean, I want all my friends smart and rich, and preferably richer and smarter than me. But I dropped out of college my third year because I couldn't countenance being brainwashed any longer. This was at the time of the Vietnam War. People don't know, but back in the day, you had two groups that were given carte blanche to recruit on all college campuses in this country. And one was every branch of the U.S. military, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, etc. And the other was a group called the Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. The SDS was an arm of Communist Party USA. I lived it. I was there. In 1970, I turned 16. I got my driver's license, rite of passage. I was formally legally adopted by my stepfather, who had served instead of my biological father since 1960, or for 10 years. My mother turned 36 years old on her birthday, and on her birthday was the largest street demonstrations in American history, before or since, and that was called Earth Day. April 22nd, 1970. You can do a search on YouTube and you can hear the newscast, the videos of what was happening across America on every major city. But what we were not told, I didn't learn this until years later, on my mother's birthday, the very first Earth Day was the 100-year anniversary of Vladimir Lenin's birthday. No accident. No accident.
Wow.
What you're seeing today and why we are fighting amongst each other is because we do not realize what has happened. We have a marriage of fascism, communism, socialism, mercantilism, Zionism. So many of these isms have been blended together into one to create this booming, buzzing confusion because we refuse to actually identify the elephant in the room as being its source.
I think it's not that people are refusing to acknowledge it. I think just most people are just unaware of it, and it's not their fault because, like you said, they've deliberately kept it out of the
Well, why don't we
light.
do that? Why don't we change that?
Yeah, we were doing that. Can I just check something? So I read, is it true that Nikki Rapana, who wrote the book about communitarianism, said that a lot of the communitarian law came from Talmudic law? Is that right?
That's what she said. Well, to me, it's not what I would say. It's what she said. Okay. I would say it's every bit as much canonical and ecclesiastical law as it is Talmudic law. I mean, we have noted Protestant and Catholic theologians in American life and history that are part and parcel of this thing called communitarianism and help bring it along. You know, I can tell you this. Communitarianism was not even a word entry in the encyclopedia and the dictionaries for some time. Okay, even though the word has been extant within the English lexicon since 1841. And Nikki is said to have been the one that actually put the word up on Wikipedia as an entry, and she was attacked. They wouldn't allow her to place a reference to communitarian law, number one. See, they want to keep our brains divided, separated, so that we cannot coalesce or cohere or make sense of the world because they wield the language and their control of the media to keep us off balance, off kilter, and discombobulated. This is all done for a reason. That's why I say this Department of Defense, including the intelligence agencies and big media circles, they know what communitarianism is. You can bet your ass they know what it is, but they're not going to say the word because that would defeat their purpose. They don't want the people to know that they're being warred upon and being destroyed and poisoned every day. They don't want them to know that because then they might start talking. Then they might start building up forces. I don't think you can actually even organize on this thing called the fucking internet. I just don't think it's possible. It's an espionage and a surveillance weapon, and it's tied to spyware of every kind, stripe, kind, device, etc. It's that what that means is that we don't think that we can have ordinary conversations with our neighbor. What the hell happened? We can't talk turkey with our children. What the hell happened? We gave it all to the schools and the experts, the authorities, the smart people. Sorry, I'm on a rant again.
No, talking about children, as you know, earlier on the week when we were meant to be doing this podcast, we had some tech issues. And to fit you in, because right now I'm booking 8 weeks in advance, to fit you in, I said, let's do it on a Sunday, much to my wife's disappointment, because I promised her I would never work on the weekend. Is it okay if we wrap up now at 90 minutes? And can I get you back for a second part where we talk about solutions? Because, yeah, a lot of people do want solutions. And I think that in itself is another whole podcast. I think you've done a great job of explaining communitarianism and communitarian law and the danger it faces humanity. So I think now let's do a second episode where we talk about solutions. Is that okay?
That's cool. Anytime. Thank you for inviting me on. I know it's a difficult subject to broach, but it has to be. And again, I'm thinking about all you smart guys that are journalists and podcasters. And I know you guys are smarter and better educated than I am. So, hey, take up the cause because it is something real. It is here. It's now. It's upon us, and it's a serious threat. And I'm sorry, but as long as we keep avoiding discussing it, we're going nowhere. Thank you.
My final question of the show, which I ask everyone, is, Lark, imagine you're on your deathbed. Could be years from now, could be next week. Before you pass away and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you give?
I could share with them something that I wrote, and its title is Here Lies Truth. And if you wish, I'll share it with you. It'll take all of about 2 minutes.
Go for it.
I'll share it with y'all. We have to understand something. The world today, all the smart guys, the philosopher kings, have decided that facts are relative, morality is relative, and even truth is relative. It doesn't exist. So at the end of the day, what we have is a failure to communicate because we don't seem to give credence and serious attention to this thing called morality. It is constantly conflated with ethics, like within the worlds of the bioethicists like Ezekiel Emanuel and Christine Grady, who was married to Anthony Fauci. We don't want to know these things. But there's a difference between ethics and morality. And I would like to delve into that too, because see, Harold Berman, who taught American law students for 60 years, he spoke of the Western legal tradition. 40 of those years were at Harvard. So he's brainwashed at least 2 generations of lawyers today. That man who passed away only a few years ago. He spoke of the Western legal tradition, not the American constitutional system. That died. So we could talk about that at length, but basically what he said was that there's no separation between religion, philosophy, economics, and the law, that all separation was illusory. And you know what? That's one of the few things he ever said or wrote about that I tend to agree with. So we cannot ignore religion, philosophy, economics, or the law as being really just one and the same. And that's something that we should discuss because, again, what's happened is, let's not forget, Ezekiel Emanuel also styles himself a utilitarian. That's the combination word, the portmanteau that combines the words futile and utilitarianism. Remember, Jeremy Bentham was the father of utilitarianism. He's the one that produced the manuscript titled Panopticon. There's much to discuss, and I don't mean to make things difficult, but if anybody really cares that's listening right now, go to my website. It's simply tinyurl.com/Lark in Texas. Sorry. Okay. And you could go do a search on Facebook, Laurence with a U, Douglas Cumbie. That's my name. Cumbie. I go by Lark because it's the only name that I consider real because that was conferred upon me when I was like 4 or 5 years old by my late younger brother, who was, by the way, smarter than me.
So the question is, on your deathbed, my dear friend, what advice would you give to your loved ones? And you've already got something written, and you're going to recite it for me now. So let's go. Let's hear it.
Very good. Here lies truth. Little lies versus damnable lies. And what the hell, pray tell, is really the fucking difference? This inscription found carved on a rock serves as a final memorial to one Salty O'Day. Note, Boot Hill. Here lies Salty O'Day, 1861 to 1881. Hoss thief, a rope necktie, an old oak tree, and Salty wasn't what he used to be. Yes, in America we used to hang 'em high. Them hoss thieves, I mean. It was the code of the Old West on the frontier at a time when lawmen were often scarce, and yet the law was observed mostly as a given. Stay the course and resist the fucking evil that's all around us. Many people of different cultures around the world know this law is the golden rule. The language may differ, yet the ideal remains constant. At least I know the famous illustrator of Americana, Norman Rockwell, thought as much. Link titled Golden Rule. Response to a recent post by Tashi Sidford. We know they are lying. They know they are lying. They know we know they are lying. We know they know we know they are lying, but they are still lying. Attributed to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The technique of infamy is to start 2 lies at once and get people arguing heatedly over which is the truth. Ezra Pound. In religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are often, in almost every case, gotten secondhand and without examination from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions at issue, but have taken them at second hand from the other non-examiners, whose opinions about them were not worth a brass farthing. Mark Twain. When man adopted language as a primitive means to effect communication, he became a storyteller. This foundation then taught him how to lie in more subtle and artful ways, learning too along the way that the greatest lie of them all always begins with the art of lying by omission. It was indeed the age of information, but information was not the precursor to knowledge. It was the tool of the salesman. From In a Nation of Salesmen by Earl Shorris in 1980. Diogenes from 2011, the title of my inaugural broadcast as a radio host in 2011 on my 57th birthday. Social scientists have long recognized a common human trait called cognitive dissonance, essentially that peculiar feeling of holding two conflicting thoughts or ideas at once. A lesser-known trait is that all of us lie. In fact, we lie constantly. It's just part of our nature to lie. We understand a half-truth, whether it's born from human error, it relies on etiquette, bespeaks of noble intentions and political correctness, or even it's just an itty-bitty lie promulgated by uncertainty or by an unconscious omission of material facts is, after all said and done, still an untruth. Therefore, dear friends, it's an out-and-out lie. I know some might insist on an untruth can be just a simple-minded white lie, just a fib, and not so much a bald-faced lie at all, if you get my drift, as I'm sure you do. These lies bedevil us so often that I wonder if the lies start to multiply as soon as we form the words for them. In our struggles for goodness and truth, and perhaps just simply to get along in our day-to-day affairs without doing too much harm, we in truth may not intend to lie. May it be that we try not to be found out about our camouflages, several intents and purposes, with their nuanced double meanings, or our mostly hidden subterfuges. Instead, oh well, one way or another, you just know we're going to lie. And we're perfectly capable of telling some real whoppers too. Whether those lies are dictated to ourselves or to anyone else within earshot, it makes no damn difference whatsoever. So why don't we just come clean about our lying? Without even knowing about it, we can still tell lies, even when we pretty well know it. We tell some mighty tall tales. That's why everything presumably known and repeated under the sun makes us all out to be chronic liars. And that's because the entire body of beliefs, half-truths, stilted conjectures, expert opinions, innuendos and inferences, empirical evidence, and laughable lies we call knowledge is just too many times a circulating series of half-baked ideas dreamt up by, of course, someone else. And so that's the way it is, and it's the way of the world, I'm afraid. Full of lies and damn lies. The big liars, and you and me, the not-so-big liars, which is why some are more sweet than others. The end. And you'll also note the links I provided in the WhatsApp correspondence between you and me, which you may include, which defines things like cognitive dissonance and what is a slide. You've probably never heard of these things, but these are terms that are used in military intelligence circles, big media circles, copywriting, propagandist circles, etc. A slide is a conditioned response which dead ends one's thinking, and or it terminates debate or an examination of the topic at hand. But first, you must induce the slither in order to effect the slide. And what does this mean, you may ask? It means that people take advantage of this common human trait we all share. It's a universal trait known as cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable sensation of holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. So this is for your edification. There is a lot of good stuff there, if any, and I'm willing to share it. It's up to you, but it's not two sentences, I'm afraid. Here lies truth. You have to, this forces you to think, Ahmad, okay? And this is something that we don't do very well anymore. We don't think, we react. And we could cover a lot of this in detail if you'd like, if you ever want to visit again. I'm happy to share, but you're going to have to digest this stuff yourself, okay? In 3 words.
You have to think for yourself.
That's right. Independence and free will is being bred right out of us as we speak. It's a long-term plan. We could talk for hours and hours. We could cite the historical events, the personages, the quotes, the writings, and we could go on and on, okay? But it's very simple. We're being taught to become slaves. It's called machine learning today. We have to basically teach the machine everything we know about ourselves so the machine can know how to categorize us, to classify us, so it can control us. It's called machine learning. And, I mentioned, I think to you once before, that this whole new economic system, which is being rolled out as we speak, it's born from the likes of Sir Ronald Cohen in England. You have to learn about the social impact bond, fintech. What is guiding this new financial system? What are the incentives being provided? The investors. This whole system is about social engineering as a service, and you're going to see it more and more as you are having to gain permission from the fucking machine to do anything. So we are being seduced all of us, because we simply are not looking at the forest for the trees. Meanwhile, at least half the population, no matter where you live, is being incentivized to actually wage war upon you, to poison you, to maim you, to kill you. This is part and parcel of a two-part agenda that I mentioned once before. Number one is depopulation. It's no joke. Number two is technoslavery. It's no joke. And what is it we all stand to lose the most? Property. Concomitant with property is privacy. Under any construction of law, if you have no right to any claim of a right to privacy or the right to own property, then what the fuck are you but a slave? And so you're going to have to basically, and same with your listeners, anybody else, you're going to have, you're not going to get the straight answers in about a 2-second soundbite. If you want an elevator speech, I just provided it. There's only 3 words you got to remember. I mentioned that to you once before, to your listeners. If you don't believe it, look it up. Or I'll be happy to point you the way to resources where you can determine this for yourself, to verify it. But this is the one word which exists in the English language which nobody talks about. The evidence is, what will people take away, and will they actually talk the word in relation to everything else that's going on? Or are they just going to simply respond to the news all the time?
It's been hidden from them. Like you said,
There's no question.
Most people have not been told or informed about this. They've been kept in the dark. And it's not their fault. It's not my fault. I didn't know about this 6 months ago. But that guy, Brian Bennett, he informed me about you and the word communitarianism. So here we go. Look, we've done the podcast on it. It's going to get published. I'm going to write Substack. Hopefully several thousand people are going to listen and read and understand what it is.
Well, I've already complimented you on that.
Thank you so much. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.